Wall Street has made an enormous bet on the Iran crisis ending, although Tehran has not accepted the proposed arrangement. What makes this story even stranger is the person driving that optimism. Bessent is the Treasury Secretary, the administration's main economic spokesman, and a vocal advocate for semiconductor industry. Now, he's effectively commenting on military strategy and negotiations with Iran. Somehow, he's everywhere at once.
The largest military campaign since World War II against the Iranians, and now because of that, we are in talks with the Iranians, and I think there is a chance we may have a deal today or tomorrow.
Investors heard those comments and reacted instantly. The S&P 500 jumped to new all-time highs, adding approximately $1.2 trillion in market value within 24 hours. Oil prices dropped sharply because traders began pricing in the reopening of Hormuz, restore energy supplies and lower inflation. The market was desperate for that kind of signal. In only 1 month, the 10-year Treasury yield climbed from below 4.4% to roughly 4.75%, moving above the previous trade war tackle level. If oil remained elevated, inflation would stay high, borrowing costs would keep rising, and the pressure could destabilize the entire financial system. So what is actually being discussed? Qatar is mediating a temporary arrangement between the United States and Iran. Under the proposal, inbound vessels would travel through Iranian waters, while outbound vessels would use Omani waters. No tolls would be charged during the initial 60 days trial. Iran and Oman would then negotiate a separate system for possible future fees. That's a complicated experiment involving several government shipping routes and unresolved conditions. Even if approved, it would only restore traffic through one critical waterway. The wider conflict would continue. So why has Wall Street treated an unsigned 60-day trial like a permanent solution? Because Tehran still has enough bargaining power to shape what happens next and demand something substantial in return. Tehran's position remains powerful because it controls two major pressure points: access through the Strait of Hormuz and through Houthis shipping across the Red Sea. Reports about Iran's demand remain conflicting. Some suggest Tehran wants direct tolls or transit fees from vessels. Other points to security guarantees and formal recognition of a wider Iranian role in protecting regional shipping. Whatever the exact terms, reopening those roads will come at a price. One possible workaround is now being discussed. Gulf states and the European Union could finance a dedicated regional fund. Officially, that money would support safe navigation, environmental protection, and search and rescue operations. The structure would resemble the model used in the Strait of Malacca. That would allow Iran to receive funding without imposing a simple toll on every ship passing through Hormuz. Politically, Washington could say it rejected Iran's demand for direct payments, while Tehran could still present the arrangement as recognition of its regional influence. But there are many moving parts. Iran must first accept zero fees during the initial 60 days period. Tehran and Oman then need to agree on what happens afterward. Shipping companies, Gulf governments, and European partners must also trust that the security arrangement will actually hold. Trump is now trapped between two very difficult options. If Iran refuses, he can escalate again and risk pushing oil, inflation, and treasury yields sharply higher. Or he can accept an agreement that largely reflects Iranian demands and present it as a successful exit from the conflict. Trump has already warned that Iran could be struck again if Hormuz is not reopened on schedule. For now though, Washington appears more focused on protecting the market rally than starting another round of escalation. And that choice says a lot, because the Iran conflict has already hit the US economy hard, something Bessent effectively admitted himself. Listen carefully to how Bessent describes the economy here.
Look, I think we were growing at probably 4% before the president made the decision to go into Iran, and I think we can easily get back to three for the year. And we're seeing across all parts of the economy that things are very strong.
His comments reveal how much damage Washington is trying to contain. Bessent continues to describe the economy as extremely strong even after acknowledging the serious impact of the war. Higher oil prices feed inflation, inflation keeps pressure on treasury yields, and expensive credit spreads the damage across housing, manufacturing, and financial markets. His talk about a possible peace deal serves a very specific purpose. I would call it geopolitical forward guidance. By signaling that an arrangement is close, Bessent pushes oil lower and reduces inflation expectations. That can pull treasury yield away from dangerous levels while supporting stocks and industries that depend heavily on affordable credit. It resembles yield curve management in practice, although it's not conventional yield curve control. The Federal Reserve uses forward guidance to influence expectations. The Bank of Japan goes further and directly protects its bond market. And now Bessent is trying to influence similar expectations through diplomacy and public statements. Convince investors that peace is coming, and financial conditions may begin easing before any agreement is signaled. This also helps Trump manufacturing narrative. The manufacturing PMI has reached 55.6, which sounds impressive. But PMI measures whether business activity is expanding or contracting. It doesn't count the total number of factory jobs. More than 70,000 US manufacturing positions have disappeared since 2025, and the recent improvement comes from a low base. Trump is also promoting the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now estimate of 6.2% growth in the third quarter as evidence of powerful boom. GDP Now is a volatile real-time model, and its estimate can change dramatically as new data arrive. Sustaining 6.2% would probably require AI construction to accelerate dramatically, or another major expansion of liquidity. Neither provides a stable foundation for broad long-term prosperity. That dependence on AI spending brings us to SpaceX, where huge promises, heavy borrowing, and permanently rising compute demand are all colliding. The company is partnering with NVIDIA to bring data center into orbit. Its Starmine AI-1 payload would run exclusively on NVIDIA's new Rubin chips, turning space infrastructure into another piece of the AI boom. What stands out is how circular the structure has become. NVIDIA invests in companies that need advanced computing infrastructure. Those companies could then lease capacity from SpaceX, while SpaceX spends billions buying NVIDIA chips to build that capacity. Each participant becomes a customer, supplier, or investor in the others, strengthening the revenue story across the entire loop. It works beautifully while AI demand keeps growing at an extraordinary rate. If that demand weakens, the financial logic starts falling apart. SpaceX is still losing money despite rising revenue, while almost $16 billion has already been directed into AI data center development. Starlink revenue jumped 66%, which is impressive, yet revenue from actual rocket launches remain below $1 billion. The company increasingly resembles an internet and compute leasing business attached to a space operation. Investors appear unsure how to value that combination. Shares initially climbed 9.4% after the results, but then dropped 8.4%, surrendering almost the entire gain. The market still has no clear answer to the most important questions. Can SpaceX attract orbital data center customers at scale? Can it compete with Meta and other major hyperscalers? And what happens if cheaper Chinese compute makes leasing capacity in orbit economically unattractive? The approaching supply shock makes this even more unstable. On August 6, more than 90 million insider shares become eligible for sale. That could more than double the existing tradable supply in a single day. By December, 40% of all shares could be unlocked, representing more than 8 times the supply available today. From July 2027, Elon Musk could also begin selling billions of dollars from his own holdings. Strong AI revenue may continue supporting the valuation, but heavy spending, persistent losses, rising share supply, and an unproven orbital compute model leave SpaceX far from stable. In many ways, the company captures the fragility of the broader US market. Enormous promises, expensive financing, and very little room for disappointment. That fragile setup extends far beyond SpaceX. Trump is now using every positive data point to convince Americans that the economy is booming and everything is fine.
We have more people working in the United States today than ever in history. We're doing an unbelievable job. Costs, I inherited very, very high costs, and they're all coming down now. The food, the groceries, it's all coming down. We've done a great job. You know, I think we should be given an A+ on the economy, but
some grocery prices may generally be offering relief, and cheaper gasoline would certainly help households. The broader inflation problem, however, has not disappeared. Trump's claim that gasoline could fall toward $2 or $3 per gallon depends heavily on restoring energy flows through Hormuz. Until shipping returns to normal, those lower prices remain far from guaranteed. The market is now betting on one very specific chain of events. First, Iran accepts the temporary Hormuz agreement. Shipping and oil flows then began returning to normal, and that will lead to weaker inflation and lower Treasury yields. Lower yields would give the hyperscalers room to continue their astronomical spending and maintain extremely high AI valuations. Every link depends on the one before it holding together. But two major risks are still being underpriced. The Iran war is not actually over, regardless of how confidently Washington talks about an agreement. And AI demand at the scale investors are assuming remains completely unproven. But Bessent has taken the optimism even further.
So we are starting to see, I got sick of hearing about this K-shaped economy. I can say here definitively the K-shaped economy is over.
Reopening Hormuz could clearly improve the overall outlook. Businesses would pay less for energy, transportation costs could decline, and households might finally receive some meaningful relief. But claiming that the K-shaped economy is over goes much further than the evidence allows. A rising S&P 500 tells us that investors are optimistic. It doesn't prove that prosperity is being shared equally. Everything now comes down to whether Washington can convert that optimism into a real agreement. If the agreement succeeds, it would give the rally a genuine economic foundation. If it fails, Trump must either tolerate Iranian leverage or escalate again. Either choice would show how much confidence entered stock prices before the Iran had agreed to anything. So do you think Iran accepts this temporary Hormuz deal? Or has the market just added $1.2 trillion based on another promise Washington cannot deliver? Let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, don't forget to hit the like button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.